In opening this class, the first evening, I ask you to remember that the object of our study and the object of our work is the attaining of a divine or infinite state of consciousness. As human beings, we are limited. As human beings, we can go no further than our environment or education or personal experience can carry us in life. As human beings, we are subject to what the world calls laws, natural laws, laws of matter, laws of limitation, hereditary laws, medical laws, theological laws. And it would appear that we are something like corks floating on the ocean, victims of every wave and every bit of force that can come from any direction, from the water, from the wind above, and probably from forces beneath the water. Always man, as a human being, is a victim, is a target. Man is always being played upon by forces. They can be economic forces, they can be political forces. Forces of weather, forces of climate, forces of food. If we were to permit ourselves, we could also live a continuous life of fear, a continuous life of doubt, a continuous life of wondering what is going to happen next and what direction is it coming from. As a matter of fact, that is the life that the world is living. At this present moment, the night before the inauguration of a new president of the United States, the world, especially the world on this continent, is for a moment looking up with a great deal of hope as to what the new president and the new administration can do. Considering the conditions of the world at large, probably that hope is being tempered with a little bit of doubt as to what the outcome ultimately will be. We too might take the position of wondering and doubting and fearing, but for one thing. As students, we have already proven through years and years and years of study and work and demonstration that it is not necessary for man to be a victim of time or tide or conditions. That bringing himself into harmony with the higher laws, higher powers, he becomes not the victim of circumstances, but in a great measure, and of course only in the measure of his understanding, a master of circumstances and conditions. The secret has been with men throughout all ages. No one has a copyright on it. No one has a patent. Every public library in the world will reveal the secret of harmonious and healthful living, successful living. We need only study the great spiritual revelations of all time, of all people, to find the thread. And that thread, which is repeated in this age, is embodied in the term true identity. At one time it was voiced or written in this manner: know thyself. And another time it was, know ye not that ye are the temple of God? Ye are the temple of God. You see, your identity is being revealed. In the other case, you are told to learn your identity. Know thyself. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God? You are told now what your true identity is. Children of God. If children, heirs. If heirs, joint heirs with Christ and God to all the heavenly riches. There comes a time in the experience of every individual when human circumstances are such that they realize they cannot go any further in the unfoldment of a happy or successful or prosperous life without the aid of something beyond humanhood. And it is in such moments that people turn to what is ordinarily termed God. Some find God and most do not. Probably the word God itself keeps many people from finding it, since that word has so many meanings of an orthodox nature, of a superstitious nature, almost of a tribal nature, that the way is lost. In other words, what we usually do is, instead of finding man made in the image and likeness of God, we usually come up finding God made in the image and likeness of man. We find God to be more human than our own parents. Our parents punish us occasionally, but this God seems to take a special delight in punishing us all the time. Our parents punish us for infractions of certain rules and laws, but it just seems that God has got many more laws than human parents have, and the punishments keep coming and become deeper all the time, ending up sometime in hell and damnation for eternity. For what? Oh, doesn't make any difference. Anything from missing church on Sunday. In this search, it isn't going to do to find another superstition, another tribal god of rewards and punishments. It isn't going to do to increase our blind faith in some far-off superstitious being. And so, as people in this last century have turned for help to the higher powers, the deific forces, they have learned, first of all, from the teachings of Jesus Christ, that the kingdom of God is within you. Of course, they go back into the Old Testament too and find a God near at hand. God was never very far from Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. God was never very far from Moses, Elisha, Elijah. God was never very far from Jesus, Paul, John. And so whether we go to the Old Testament or whether we go to the New, the first thing that impresses us is that we have been making the mistake of praying out to a God, praying to a God separate and apart from our own being. Now, the first lesson that we learn is, in the words of our poet, that God is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. And as we learn that, we learn also to close our eyes and keep ourselves within our own being and expect an unfoldment or revelation from within, rather than a contact with something or something unknown outside of our being and afar off. Probably if there weren't so many false teachings about God, we would have an easy time finding God, because just from Scripture and from some of the great mystics, we would learn not to look out or pray out, but to keep these eyes closed and turned within until the revelation came from within our own being. As we have quoted in the opening of The Infinite Way, the poet Browning tells us that truth is within ourselves, and we don't open the way for truth to come into us, but rather we open the way for truth to flow out from us. The nature of this class, this particular class, is going to be the unfoldment and revelation of God flowing out from our being. We are going to, through meditation and the opening of consciousness, we are going to make a transition. We're going to go further this week than we have ever gone before in our studies, because in this week we are going to give up that identity which can even be acted upon for good. We are even going to give up that identity that can be blessed. We are going to make the transition from that person seeking good, seeking truth, seeking life eternal, to the individual identity, which is itself the source and center of infinite good, to the revelation of that individual identity which is the blessing, not receives it, is the blessing. You already know that any sense of discord in your experience, whether it is mental, moral, physical, financial, any sense of discord in your experience is but a sense of separation from God that you entertain. You entertain. It isn't your fault. You did not create that sense of separation from God. That was done for you by our religionists long, long ago. That was done by philosophers. That was done by people who were seeking God somewhere outside their own being, by those who were seeking good to be added to them, by those who were seeking, without the benefit of the major revelations that have come down through the ages. Everyone in this room has been a student of one form or another of truth for a long, long time. Does not have to be reminded of the fact that they have already proven that the presence and power or realization of oneness with infinite power is, of course, a healing agency of the mind, of the body, and of the purse. And that in proportion as you have come into the realization of that oneness, as you have come into the realization of the true nature of your being, the true nature of God's being as individual being, in that proportion have you risen above the circumstances and conditions of human existence. Now, as you take this next step, you will find yourself at first on strange ground, because there will be cut out from under you the ground on which you stand. You will literally, before this week is over, find yourself floating through space and wondering where you're going to land. There'll be no ground under you. You'll be very much in the position of Alan Boone's great wondering statement, what are people going to do when they have no earth to stand on? You will have to discover what is meant by a stone that was cut out of a mountain without hands. You will have to discover what the power of the invisible is. What it is that acts upon our being, upon our lives, and transforms them. What it is that is invisible. You will come nearer my explanation of the infinite way. You remember how many times I've said that before you can attain that which you are seeking, you must come to a place where you can see that which is invisible, hear that which is inaudible, and know that which is unknowable. Seems difficult. It isn't. The reason it isn't is that it is a transformation of consciousness from the human, the thinking mind, to the intuitive. The things of God are foolishness with man. And as you come to this revelation or unfoldment of God, you will find that it will not seep through the intellect, but rather that it will define itself to that which we call the soul faculties, the inner sense. Do you have eyes and do not see? Do you have ears and do not hear? There's only a way of reminding us that you do not see spiritual truth or hear spiritual truth with the eyes or ears. There is an inner sense, an inner consciousness that receives and interprets truth to us. That is why the things of God are foolishness with man, and also why the things of man are foolishness with God. And so in beginning this work, begin in a relaxed attitude. The purpose of the meditation is to open our consciousness to the inflow to the pouring forth from the infinite storehouse, from the universal. It will be necessary tonight and probably tomorrow night to review some of the basic points so that we do not lose the way in which we're going. And so I'm going to remind you that every form of discord, every form of inharmony is due to a sense of separation from the infinite source of good. We may call that God, we may call that divine mind or divine love, we may call that universal life, we may call it the Spirit of God, but regardless of what name or what term we use, we are acknowledging that there is an infinity. We are acknowledging that there is an infinite source of good, an infinite storehouse, if you will. We are acknowledging that, well, I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. We are acknowledging that I live, yet not I, that Christ liveth my life. Christ meaning the Spirit or presence of God in our individual being or individual awareness. Acknowledging in any word or any term that there is an infinite presence or power, an infinite source of good, we go on to the next step and realize that as that infinite source, infinite good, comes into our experience, we bring forth or show forth the beauties or bounties of that infinity. Without it, we would be nothing. Without it, we could do nothing. There is a universal mind. There is one divine life. There is a source of good called divine love. John says God is love. The human sense of existence is a life lived in and of itself without the aid of that source. Now then, in ordinary religious belief, it is only necessary to pray and ask this God or source to bless us, to come to us, to do for us. And of course the history of the world's wars for 7,000 years and plagues and disasters is of course sufficient proof that that type of praying hasn't worked, and probably there is not even such a God as is being prayed to. It only comes into the experience of those who actually make contact with this thing called God, who actually come into an intimate and personal experience with it that show forth its fruitage. There is where you have the example throughout all time of those great men that we today call saints or seers or prophets, sages or saviors, who have made an actual, direct and personal contact with that source of all good. You will find that, of course, all the way from the original Krishna of thousands of years B.C. to Lao Tse of 550 B.C., Buddha of 500 B.C., Jesus of Nazareth, Paul, John, and in the Hebrew scriptures, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Elisha, Elijah, all men, and of course there's a large literature of women who have made an actual living contact with the source of all good and then began to show it forth in their daily lives, in their living, and it enabled them to be a blessing to all who came within contact of them. As I've said before, Unfortunately, the spoken word was all they had to do with, and for that reason only those who could come personally into the presence of the great masters of the past could receive the benediction or blessing of that contact. As the printing press began to give us scripture and inspirational and spiritual literature, it became possible for more people to at least contact the letter of truth, the word of truth, and in a lesser degree, the consciousness of the writer of truth. And so we find in the last 500 years many, many more people coming in direct influence, direct contact, and oneness or at one-ment with that infinite source. Now, as this literature has spread and as individuals have come into being who have been able to make that direct contact and give it forth to their disciples and the students of their disciples, the word has become more generally known that it is possible for everyone, and I literally mean everyone, to bring the divine grace or the power of the infinite into individual experience, so that we are no longer as limited, no longer as dependent on human sources and resources as was formerly the case. In our own experience here, we are living witnesses to the fact that we are showing forth some measure of what that contact has done for us. Practically everyone in this room has at some time or other made the contact or been under the teaching or guidance of those who have made it and brought it forth for their benefit. It would be a simple matter for a group of men and women in this age to set themselves aside and dedicate themselves to a life of conscious oneness with this power we call God, and be a continuous blessing to all who came within range of them. And of course now that field would be wider, since we would have not only the spoken word from the individual and the printed word of that enlightened or illumined one, but as I said before, in this day we would have even the wider range of the spoken word going forth with the consciousness of the teacher. Because this is true, more people today are being freed from the limitations of personal sense, that is, the limitations of their personal selfhood, than has ever been true in the history of the world. But it isn't enough. It isn't enough, because the possibilities and potentialities are that each one of us, every one of us, can be the outlet for this love, grace, power, benediction, and there is no reason now to restrict it to a few teachers, a few leaders, a few saviors, a few messiahs, a few saints or seers. At one time it was believed that only those called to the religious life, that is the ministry, the rabbinate, the priesthood, that only those could enjoy this conscious union with God and benefit their flocks. Today we know that every man, woman, and child on the face of the globe can bring themselves into that union and be a center or force out into their neighborhood, their community, so that the day might be ushered in eventually when the kingdom of heaven will be manifest on earth as it is in heaven. Now then, as we have seen that a human being cut off from that source is subject to sin, sickness, lack, limitation, death, subject to all the economic changes of the day, political changes of the day, physical changes, and medical theories, so also we have learned and demonstrated that as we came back into a conscious union with this allness, that the ills of the flesh left us, ills of mind and body, also ills of business and pocketbook, so that it is not startling to us today, although it is to many out in the world, that we are enabled through this contact, through this oneness, not only to touch our own lives to better health and harmony, but that we are now able to break down the infectious and contagious diseases and lessen these out in the world, that we are able now, as you have seen demonstrated, to stop this warfare between capital and labor, settle strikes without physical wreckage in the business world, bring ourselves through wars without loss of life or limb. And as we have been enabled to do that, just the few tens of thousands of people who up to this time have come into this consciousness of their true being, but as you so well know, the spread of it is even beyond our imagination. And so we must go further, and instead of raising another generation of practitioners and teachers set aside to save the man in the street, we must now carry this word to the man in the street, that everyone may enjoy the benefits of this realization. There is, however, a limit to that, as you know. We will not proselyte. We will not try to induce anyone to come into this work or even to be concerned or have knowledge of its teaching, since we have already learned that it is not the way. In other words, we could stand on street corners or hire theaters or baseball parks and fill them with advertising and other means and tell them this message. But frankly, it has already been demonstrated that not more than this room full would get any benefit from it. So we might as well have only this room full and not be concerned about the others. In other words, it isn't that we maintain this work as a secret. Oh no, it's open enough. The books are for sale. The recordings are all over the world. And the teaching is certainly in the major cities of this country and many others. It isn't that. It is only that instead of going out in the highways and byways and trying to tell the world something that it is not yet prepared for because it isn't seeking it, but it is already demonstrated that everyone whose consciousness is open to it finds it. Everyone finds it in their own way. Sometimes it's very, very mysterious how these teachings and books and writings and benefits come into the possession of some people. But one thing is certain: there is no way of keeping truth from the individual ready for it. And on the other hand, let me assure you of this, there is no way of giving truth to anyone not ready for it. And this reason you must see. The teaching is transcendental. It is a reversal of the ordinary human sense of existence. It is a complete reversal of the ordinary sense of life. In other words, with just such a simple thing as supply, income, wealth. The world's concept, of course, is that you go out and get it. You achieve it, you accomplish it, you work for it, you plan or scheme or steal for it or kill for it. But you do, in some way or other, get it. And we reverse that and say that the secret of supply is giving it. Now, you wouldn't want to go out on the street and tell that to people down there, would you? No. In the same way, the world accepts material remedies as being curative. And wouldn't it be a foolish thing to try to tell them that, as effective as it may be, there is a more effective way, and try to have them to understand that and receive it? Oh, no. It would be as ridiculous as saying that it is not necessary to pray to God for our good. I have made that statement to people who were well trained in religious beliefs and seen the shock on their faces. You do not pray to God for your good? No, no, no. Why? Well, according to every teaching on the face of the globe, God is omniscient, all knowledge, all wisdom. How can you ask God for something that God must know that you already need? That is, if it is within God's power to bestow it. Again, we are told that God is love. Since God is love, why ask God for love? God is love. God has no power to withhold love any more than God has power to withhold crops from the ground or fish from the sea or birds from the air. Oh no, life must fulfill itself. I am come that ye might be fulfilled. Life, the function of life, is to fulfill itself, and its function is to fulfill itself in infinite and abundant measure. We have brought up this point of praying for supply during the Depression. Oh yes, so many prayers were sent up to God for more supply. All over the world, churches were open day and night for those who wanted to pray God for supply. And you know as well as I do, there wasn't any lack of supply. The ocean, every ocean, was full of fish. The state of Maine never ran out of potatoes. The South never ran out of cotton. The Middle West never ran out of cattle, wheat. As a matter of fact, these things were produced so abundantly that every day of the week, thousands of railroad trains and scows were sent out with food to throw in the ocean and get rid of. Burnt up. Cattle was plowed under. Farmers were paid not to raise crops. And all the time the churches were open day and night praying for more supply. What would the world have done if God had been able to increase our supply? We would have had twice as much food to throw in the ocean, twice as much to burn up, and twice as much money to give farmers not to raise more. There was no sense to praying to God for supply, unless you wanted to pray for him to back it up to your back door for you in a truck. God was already producing more than the earth was using. At this very moment, people all over the world are praying for God to increase the supply on earth. You know that as well as I do. And you also know that if God doubled the amount that was on earth, that these people who are praying for it wouldn't get any of it. You know that as well as I do. Prayers to God for supply are even more foolish than praying to your own parents to set tables for you tomorrow, or for your children to pray to you to buy winter clothes in winter and give them summer clothes in summer. Surely you know your children's need. And if you, as human parents, know how to be good to your children, what do you think of God? What do you think of the creative principle of life? That it knows less how to be good to you and to me? No. No, you know better than that. You know better than that. You know right well that all the prayers that ever were sent up to God for more food and more clothing are just so much waste wordage and time. There is a way to bring the infinity of supply into your experience. But that way is not to assume that God's withholding it from you, and that by getting on your knees or saying a lot of sentimental words or singing a lot of sentimental songs, that God somehow is going to start giving you what up to now he's been withholding from you. Oh no. No, there is a way, and that way is contact with the source of that supply. The way is to tune in on that particular beam. The way is to become so consciously one with it that it flows through you, to you, in you, from you. But let it flow. The way is to re-establish your consciousness of oneness with the infinite source. Always remember this. You are one with it right now. Always remember this. You are at this very second, always have been, always will be, the beneficiary of all that the Father has. Way back in Hebrew Testament, in the story of the prodigal, we read, Son, thou art ever with thee. All that I have is thine. All that I have is thine. We have the entire revelation of the Master to the effect that even though to outer sense there were only a few loaves and fishes, that actually the contact was there with so much supply that there were 12 baskets left over, full. Now, our part in restoring normalcy, in restoring harmony, in restoring abundance, is not to pray to this God to increase the supply, which is already greater than we can use, but rather it becomes our work to get back into an at one-ment with that source so that it can flow. We are no different, than this mechanism here, separated from the electric current there, and you'll have no work being done. And it wouldn't make any difference how much praying you did about it either. There must be a contact with the source of the power before that power can flow and operate. The room may be full of power. The walls may be full of power, but don't sit around praying for it. Plug it in. And then the power flows. And so it is with us. God is closer to us than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. God is the very life of our being, the very love and source of our being. But tune in. Recognize and realize the at one-ment. Now, for our first step, and remember, this is not a step in teaching, this is a step in demonstration. Everything that you receive in this work, it must be understood, must be brought into manifestation, into expression, into actual living presence. Otherwise, this work will have done you no good. The object of this class is not to add knowledge to you. It is not to teach you more of what you already know. It is to bring into demonstration as living proof that which has been established for you throughout all time. Now, first of all, there is this relationship that we are to learn. First, the relationship of our true identity, of our relationship with that infinity. And the first step in that is to be exemplified by this 15th chapter of John, in which we read, I am the true vine, my Father is the husbandman, and that ye are the branches. Now then, first of all, so as to make this very clear in your mind, realize that to outward appearances, we are separate beings. You are one there and one there, I'm one here and one here. And that so far as we know, there is no tie, no bond between us. And so far as we know, there is no contact with our source. However, if we use this illustration of the vine, the husbandman, the earth, and the branches, we begin to perceive that although there seems to be this sense of separation, actually, if we are branches, and there is a vine, and there is a husbandman, that these must be one and not three. In other words, the word tree means branches and trunk and source. It doesn't just mean branches. You don't refer to branches as tree. Neither do you refer to a trunk of a tree as a tree. Neither do you refer to the roots or source as tree. But when they are all assembled in one, then you say tree. And then you also understand by virtue of that, that the life, the one life, the only life there is, whether it's a myrtle tree or a cedar tree or a how tree or a chestnut tree, the same life flows through all. And you understand then that the life that flows through the roots into the trunk or vine and then out into the branches is the life that reveals itself as blossoms and fruit. Yes, but of course the branches and the trunk are visible. And we have to go beyond the visible in order to know that there are roots and that there is an earth in which the roots are embedded, and that the earth is flowing into those roots. That is, the minerals and substances and moisture and sunshine that permeate the earth are being drawn into those roots up through the trunk and out into the branches and forming the buds, the blossoms, and fruit. So you see that even in the matter of natural nature, all of the tree isn't visible, nor is the source of that which becomes blossoms and fruit visible. And so we have to take on faith the fact that there is a life working in that tree, and that that life will appear outwardly as fruit. That we take on faith until we have seen it demonstrated. Now then, the purpose of this teaching of the Master is to reveal to us that as branches we are not self-sustaining now. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine, no more can ye, except ye abide in me. The branch cannot bear fruit of itself, and neither can you, and neither can I, except that we abide in the vine. Now we understand that vine to be the invisible tie, the invisible bond that unites us with God, the husbandman. Remember, we are learning here of branches, a vine, And it is through the vine that this infinite life flows out into the branches, forming its fruitage. And so, we have the point brought out to us that the branch cannot bear fruit of itself. It must be connected with the vine, but even the vine itself, this invisible bond, which we call the Son of Man or Son of God or Christ within us, even that isn't the source of our supply, but it is a tie or bond uniting us to the infinite source. Now then, we have no fears or doubts about our tree and about its fruitage, because we know of this life flowing into the roots, through the trunk, out into the branches, appearing later as flowers and fruit. That we know. But we don't know it of ourselves. We have never made practical this 15th chapter of John. We have continued to think of ourselves as separate human beings, being dependent upon our own selves for our wisdom, for our supply, for our understanding, for our intelligence, even for the health and strength of our bodies, never once thinking of this universal life flowing through an invisible tie or bond into and through each one of us, and that it is this life force that appears as the success of our life. It isn't anything of you or of me, as we learn here. I am the vine, ye are the branches. This vine is the invisible bond, the spiritual power in man. And he that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. Without this life pouring through us, we can do nothing. And then we learn that herein is my Father glorified, that ye bear much fruit. Not a little, and not that you beg for it, not that you plead for it, not that you get on your knees and wonder why it's being kept for you, but on the other hand, God is glorified in that ye bring forth much fruit. But that glory cannot come unless you can see that it is not your wisdom that produces it, nor your strength, nor your understanding, nor your learning, nor even your cuteness or ability in the business world or political world, but rather that whatever of good comes into your experience is the fruitage of that eternal life. It is that eternal life that is to appear as the health of your body, as the health of your business, as the health of your home. It is the fruitage, the outpouring of that universal, infinite, divine life. And you don't beg for that, you don't plead for that, you don't pray for that. You open yourself to the flow of it. Let us assume for the moment that you are the branches. And in remembering that, remember also that you're not separate branches stuck out here in space, but that you are branches attached to a vine. And because of that, you are not separate and apart from each other, but you are part of one whole, one complete being. Remember that, because the next step will show you that the life, the divine life, that flows into or through this invisible bond is not flowing into me, it is flowing into every branch. Also, it reveals that you do not live off of your fellow man, nor do you live by benefit of his goodwill. You have all studied my work on salesmanship, business, and you know now that the old idea of a salesman going out and getting the best of his customers or overloading them or lying to them about his product is pretty nearly over. There's not much room in the business world for that type of salesman anymore. The salesman has to go out and buy wine for his customers and provide them with Ziegfeld Folly shows to entertain them. That salesman is almost dead. There's only one salesman today that can be successful. One who can be successful on the human plane by representing the best possible products, by offering it at the least possible prices and giving the best possible service. That on the human plane is salesmanship as we understand it today. But on the spiritual plane, the salesman can run rings around that man. Just run rings around him 10 times over. How? Much less legwork than ever before. Through the realization of this invisible bond that connects every man to every other man. By seeing that every individual is a branch of the one tree, the tree of life. And therefore, this man has no secret from this man. They're all receiving their enlightenment, their wisdom, their good through the invisible bond. It is very easy in that realization to present an article and find that the man already is well enough aware of what's going on to know whether he wants it and to know it quickly. Also, it saves the work of running all over creation to find 10 prospects and 1 sale, because the dependence on that flow of the one life leads you not to 10 people to find 1, but leads you to 1 to find 10 others waiting. Yes, being led to the right 1 will lead to 10 others, whereas finding the wrong 10 may not even produce the 1. If you look to your wisdom, to your guidance and your advertising to find your customer, you do a certain amount of it. If you have a continuous realization that the wisdom, the life that flows through the vine into every individual is flowing through every individual, you will find that that tie will quickly bring you into oneness with your one, the necessary one. So it is in every aspect of life. The moment that you know of your connection with the vine, the invisible bond that unites you with the source, that moment you do not compete, you do not fight the other man, you do not war with him, nor sue him, because you have access to the infinite source of your being. And it is this source that feeds you and supplies you, even while it is feeding and supplying all of the other branches on the tree. And so we learn at the very first step to look away from each other as if we needed something of each other. Look to this source, this one universal life that is flowing through us, and receive our good there. Then, the moment our attention is off of each other, the moment our attention is on this infinite source, feeding, supplying, maintaining, and sustaining us, then everything works together for good, and we are led to where we can work with each other, benefit each other, cooperate with each other, and yet not live off of each other.